Hi guys, Andrew here with headphones.com, and today I'm going to talk about the Sony WF-1000XM4 and the WF-1000XM3. And in this video, we're going to find out which one is better, or at least which one I prefer, because I do have a clear favorite. Now, normally I would do some disclaimers here and let you guys know where these review units came from, but in this case, we didn't actually get them from anywhere. We just bought them, and so they weren't provided by anybody for valuation. And coincidentally, that's also why it's taken me a little bit longer to get this review out, because we didn't get it, ahead of launch. But in any case, we do have it now, and I've been spending quite a bit of time with both of them actually, and going over the various different pros and cons of each. And so that's what we're going to take a look at in this video. Now, to start with, let's begin by talking about the case and accessories and build and all of that stuff. Now, in this case, size does matter, and clearly the XM4 is the winner there. However, I do want to let you guys know that when you're using the XM4 with this case, be very careful what you put it into, like what pocket you put it into and what else is in that pocket, because you can scuff up the case pretty easily on this one. And so you might want to put something over it or put it into a soft sleeve or something like that. Whereas on the XM3 case, I didn't have that issue at all, partially because I probably wasn't trying to put it into my pocket. But even with this one, there's just a slight scuffing on the top of it. Now let's open them up and take a look at the actual units. By the way, the pairing was very good on both of these. It's almost like a seamless thing with my phone, so it works really well. So we can see the differences here. It's very different looking IEM, and the XM4 physically looks a little bit smaller, but it's actually way less comfortable for me. I find the XM3 to be quite a bit more comfortable, and part of that has to do with the tips. The tips that they've gone for with the XM4 are these horrendous foam tips. That it's like they're foam, but they're not the kind of foam that actually conforms to your ear shape all that well. So I find these to be very uncomfortable, and you get 3 sizes, but I found that none of them, even going to the smaller size, it didn't really make this any more comfortable. And then on top of it, I find that the nozzle here is a little too close to the large part of the physical housing, causing this to sort of bash into the back side of my ear. So it's never able to kind of fully get into a comfortable spot when I wear it at the appropriate insertion depth. But I did try some additional tips out. These are just some regular silicone ones, and they fit on it just fine. And then I have a much easier time getting this to fit into my ear, which is weird because normally foam is more comfortable for me, but this seems to work a little bit better, just because it doesn't bunch up as much like these particular foam ear tips do. But in general, the shape here is the thing that is a bit of an impediment to comfort for me. And of course, that's just me. I know a lot of people didn't like the comfort of the XM3 because it has this sort of weird shape to it. And but for my ear, this seems to work quite a bit better. Now, as far as the rest of the build goes and the look and the aesthetic and all that stuff, I actually really do like the way that the XM4 looks, just because it's a little bit more seamless with the rest of the ear. It doesn't stand out as much, so it's a little more understated, which speaks to me. Yeah, I like that a lot. And actually, the cool thing about it is you can see this. This is actually the microphone here on the front, and I believe they have that kind of a little bit smaller, a little bit more recessed on the XM3. But I kind of like the way that the microphone piece looks. And so I think it does work well. So aesthetics, XM4 for me. But of course, that's just a subjective thing. Now, let's talk about the usability, features, and app integration and all that stuff. You have the same app for both, of course. The Sony one, compared to other wireless feature-rich headphones, it's quite good. Now, I'm not going to go over everything because there's actually a lot that you can do with it, and some of it, in fact, quite a lot of it, are they're gimmicks. But there is actually some stuff in there that is very useful for me. And the first is, of course, the EQ functionality. You do get around 5 different filters that you can adjust. If you want to make some changes and tweak the tuning, you can definitely do that. And then the cool thing about this is that it seems like when you pair this to another device that isn't your phone, like for example, if I pair this to my computer, even though I can't pair them at the same time like I can the over-ear Sony, I can't pair 2 devices at the same time, I can still keep the EQ preset. It seems to retain that. When I was doing my measurements and I had some adjustments made, it seemed to keep the preset there, which is pretty cool. Now, the other features that are important to me are the ability to change the noise canceling from on or off to on, and vice versa. So for example, if I'm walking around outside downtown, I want the noise canceling to be on most of the time. And then if I go into a shop or a coffee shop or whatever, and I want to talk to somebody, I want to be able to quickly turn it off. And you can map the button there on I have it set to the left side to just tap it and it turns off, which is great. And then what's also important to me is the ability to map the other side to play and pause. I know some people might want to have this as volume or next track or something like that, but for me, again, for that same use case, it's really important to have play or pause. And so I've been able to sort of map that over. So it has the features basically that I need in a wireless device, a wireless audio device of some kind. Apart from that, the connectivity, the rest of the connectivity that's going on here is a little different. With the XM4, you actually get LDAC here if you want to do prioritize sound quality rather than prioritize the connection. And with the XM3, I was not able to get LDAC. It went to SBC. And I do find there to be a difference, in particular when using the prioritize the connection mode on the XM3. There's a really noticeable digital artifacting effect that goes on. So I think that would really only be useful, at least on this unit. I don't know if this is like this on all units, but on this unit, it's definitely bad enough to where I would never use it for listening to music. I would only use it for, calls, phone calls and stuff like that. And then when you change it to prioritize sound quality, occasionally it would actually drop out. So, and enough times where it got annoying for me. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that can have something to do with the phone. It can have something to do with how far away the phone is. I'm a little bit on the tall side, so maybe it's just that my phone is too far down if I have deep pockets or something like that. And on the XM4, not only is the prioritize connection not as digitally artifact as it is on the XM3, it's also quite a bit better for the connectivity in just overall in LDAC on prioritized sound quality. So you can leave it in at least for me, I was able to leave it in prioritized sound quality mode and I didn't have any dropout issues whatsoever with this. And in some ways, that alone, I mean, depending on your use case, that might be the reason to get the XM4 or the XM3. Now, before getting into the sound quality, let's talk about the noise canceling. And I think it's actually a really interesting question worth bringing up when it comes to noise canceling true wireless IEMs in particular, because it's not really noise canceling, is it? It's more noise dulling. Now, while it's good on both of these, at least relative to the competition, thinking about the AirPods Pro, it's not on the level of the over-ear Sony WH-1000XM4 or the AirPods Max, or some of the other over-ears that do really good at noise canceling. They do a good job there. I was able to measure about a 20 dB difference between active and passive. So active being, negative 20 dB on the overall noise. So that's the amount that it actually cancels. However, there's two considerations there. One is that it's not 20 dB across the board. So with the XM4, what I found was that it does quite a bit better than the XM3 at high frequency attenuation. Also, it's not exactly 20 dB regardless, because the passive attenuation is going to have an effect, and how the fit is with each individual person, it's going to attenuate more or less. If you're not getting a great seal, you're not going to block out as much noise. Again, this is more of a noise dulling effect, not an actual noise canceling effect, and it'll do a good job at attenuating noise, background noise, that's sort of a consistent tone, just not that great for intermittent sounds. Again, in my testing, I found that, this took, 1 to 2 seconds to actually get from no attenuation to full attenuation. That's what it seemed like, at least. I think the bigger question worth asking here is the noise dulling effect of, true wireless IEMs that have active noise canceling in them significant enough reason to get them over just regular wired IEMs that have a really good fit and have really good seal there, because those will also have a noise dulling effect just by dint of isolating and occluding your ear canal. So think about that. I mean, is the extra 20 dB that you get from the active mode here really worth it? Maybe it is, because there are definitely some environments where that is really useful, but there are also other environments where it's not at all necessary. Like I would actually argue that sitting here where there's an air conditioner on right now, there's really not much benefit to the noise canceling function over just regular IEMs, because you're already going to be attenuating that sound. Nonetheless, let's talk about sound quality next. So I kind of suspect that this is going to be a little bit controversial, because there are a lot of folks who actually prefer the sound quality of the XM3, and I prefer the sound quality of the XM4. But you're gonna have to hear me out on this. Before getting into why I actually prefer the sound quality of the XM4, it's worth mentioning that there have been several different measurements of this one that I've seen online that are different from the measurements that I've done. And both using 711 standard couplers. In particular, in the treble, I've seen some measurements that have this quite a bit darker than what this one shows. You know, it could be unit inconsistency and unit variation, but you'd like to think that the tolerances for this stuff are a little bit better. But I just want to let you guys know that this one measures quite a bit more normal than some of the really dark ones that I've seen out there. And so it's just worth keeping that in mind. Now, before getting into the frequency response, which I will throw up on the screen shortly, I want to talk a little bit about the technical performance here. They both have pretty decent macro contrast going on, again, for an IEM, especially for wireless. They are both reasonable at detail retrieval. They're both reasonably spacious. Again, for an IEM, they're not like, they don't actually have actual soundstage. But as far as the in-head localization is concerned, not much going on for center image, but your left and right is decently well defined, and there's no major gaps or anything like that that I can hear. Now, I would say that this is par for the course, but I've just spent a while listening to some truly abysmal IEMs in a video that I did, not that long ago, where I checked out a whole bunch that were under $150. And these are both far and away above those. These are way better for technical performance than any of those. And I do also think that the XM3 is just a tiny little bit more resolving there in detail there in the treble, where you see a little bit more of a peak as well. And I think it's partially because of that peak that it comes across this way. It's punctuated a little bit more, whereas on the XM4, I find that the image separation is maybe not quite as well defined. It's maybe a little bit more cluttered there with busy passages, so it's not as well controlled. And then it's also, again, a little bit smoother in the treble, which means that it's also not as punctuated. So overall, I would give a slight technical performance advantage to the XM3, but it is very close. They're not that different when I EQ the XM3 to the same as the XM4. And now let's talk about that, because on the XM3, I definitely need to EQ this. On the XM4, using the app, on the XM4, I don't really need to EQ this. I mean, you can, and I've played around with it a little bit, and I just went back to the default frequency response with this. With the XM3, you have a mild V-shape going on, mostly balanced for bass to mids. Doesn't intrude all that much on the mids. It's not super bloated or anything like that. But then you also do get a little bit of spicy treble with a little bit of an emphasis there at around 6K. Maybe starting around 5.5K all the way up to like 7K. And on the EQ app, I actually pulled this down quite a bit. It's on the lower end of sibilance. Usually sibilance, the more pronounced qualities of sibilance, right in the middle, hit at around 8 to 8.5K. And this is more around 6K, where I hear the boost. And you can see it in the graph there as well. And so this is more of like the sh sounds come across a little bit aggressively on the XM3. So I dropped that by quite a bit, actually. Now, what's funny about that is that the XM4 is quite a bit more relaxed there, almost to the level of where I reduced the 6K peak on the XM3. Overall, I do think that the XM4 it's quite a bit warmer, but I find that the treble on the XM4 is a lot smoother as a result of not having that peak. Now, I think you could boost the treble here up a little bit. And what's cool about this is when you boost the range for 6.3K, which is one of the filter options in the EQ software, it doesn't boost it with a particularly narrow Q value. So that means that if you want more treble energy and presence, you can actually just boost that section in the EQ software and retain that sort of smoothness that this has without being that sort of punctuated sharpness of the XM3. Whereas on the XM3, I found that I had to reduce it, and when I reduced it, yes, it helps, but it never fully gets to that sort of smoothness quality that the XM4 has. Now, for me, I actually kind of like the bass on the XM4. I think it's totally fine, just because these are meant for going outside and they're meant for being in loud environments. And when you're in those loud environments, if you have low frequency tones that are intermittent, they are going to kind of intrude on that, and having a little bit more presence there for those lower frequencies, which again are not, the noise canceling doesn't attenuate those as well as it attenuates the high frequencies. I actually kind of think that's okay. But unfortunately, this is one of the areas where the the Sony app's filters don't let you adjust that particular range. You can drop 400 hertz, but I don't think that the benefits of doing that would outweigh the costs. You know, I wish that it were at 300 or 250 or something like that. Now, interestingly, even without EQ from the app, the XM4 does get reasonably close to my IEM preference target there, which I like to describe as basically neutral with a bass boost. It's a little more bass boosted in, again, the upper bass there on the XM4, but overall, you know, for the mids and for the treble, this is very close to that target. Now, if you're wondering why there isn't a peak there in the treble like you may have seen on some other measurements of this IEM, that's because this coupler is the Gross RIO 402 coupler, which doesn't have the coupler resonance there, and instead it dampens it a little bit. So, you know, right at around where you see that little notch there, that's kind of where that damping effect is, and I think there's a good argument there that suggests that maybe it overdamps it a little bit. So again, this is mostly exactly where I want it for its frequency response. To my ear, the XM3 is the one that needs EQ, and the XM4, at least this variant or this version of it, doesn't really need EQ. But the nice thing about it is that even if you feel that way, you can EQ this, and you can get it to be, you know, you can bring back that sparkle, and it retains the smoothness without being fatiguing or anything like that. So my conclusion is going to be that they're both good, but the XM4, I think, is a little bit better sounding there, at least for my use case, and that is going to be a little bit surprising, a little bit of a spicy take there for those who prefer the XM3 sound. But that's an important thing to consider. You know, there are a lot of people who actually do prefer the XM3 sound, and if you can find it for less money, then this is probably still a good option, because I think they're both very good IEMs. I was actually evaluating the XM3 for a while before evaluating the XM4, and I thought to myself, I would take the XM3 over the AirPods Pro. Like, I like the AirPods Pro a lot. I would probably take the XM3 over the AirPods Pro. I think that this is like a little more detailed. And then I got to the XM4, and I thought, I like the XM4 better. For its functionality, it's a little better. Like the connectivity and stuff like that's a little better. The noise canceling is a little better. And then I also find it to be a little smoother in the treble, less sort of sharp and fatiguing. And so I think ultimately, even though it's not as technically impressive or incisive as the XM3, I think that the XM4 would be my pick. However, I can see why somebody would prefer the XM3 if you're looking for more of a V-shaped kind of sound and less warm. Then, you know, the XM3 would still be, you know, probably the way to go, and especially because you can probably end up finding this one on sale given that the XM4 exists. The one outstanding question in my mind with these is whether or not this is representative, or some of the other measurements that I've seen, like the one on ratings that I've seen, it's quite dark in the treble, or, you know, if that one is representative. And, you know, with a sample size of 1, that's kind of the limitation on this. But this one just sounds like right on the money for me, almost, except for the bass. And the XM3 is like, whoa, that 6K needs to be dropped. So that's basically my take on these two. I think they're both awesome. But that's going to do it for this video. Stay tuned for some more noise canceling videos, noise canceling headphone videos in the near future, because I'm still on the quest to find the best audiophile noise canceling headphone as the cops are after me. Now's a good time to stop the video. All right, that does it for this video. Thanks for taking the time to watch it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.